Hello, indoor gardening fans. Welcome to another edition of the Indoor Gardener Podcast. I'm Greg Draiss, your host. The Indoor Gardener Podcast is brought to you by The Indoor Garden, a great place to buy plants and plant supplies online. You can find us at theindoorgarden.etsy.com. The Indoor Gardener Podcast is produced by the Wayneright Broadcasting System, where we also do podcasts on sim racing, dive bars, and the Curmudgeon Radio Show. So look for those as well. This episode is concerning water, and I've entitled it Water, Water Everywhere, but which kind of water is best for your indoor plants? A topic that comes up quite frequently online. So we're going to go through the different types of water that are available. It's not flavored water. It's just where the water comes from and what's done to it before it gets to your plants. We'll discuss the benefits of each, the drawbacks of each, and the all-important decision that you need to make is what is right for you. Now, most of us, I am sure, water with tap water, and we have very little, if any, issues watering our plants at all. I water my plants with tap water from a municipal system. I live in a private lake community in upstate New York. No, I'm not one of the guys that lives on the lake. I'm somebody that lives off the lake, and we mow the lawns for everybody that lives on the lake. So that's the gist there. And of course, that water is treated. It's treated with chlorine or chloramine. We're not sure which one they use here. And that's just to make it palatable and drinkable according to health department regulations. Now, you'll hear so many times that plant hates tap water. Don't use tap water. Use rainwater only. Only use distilled water. Well, those are all personal opinions, and most of those are not based on fact because the simple truth is there are very few issues with tap water for watering plants, especially in more developed countries, North America, Europe, etc. I'm sure you'll find some problems in some places, but generally speaking, because we got so many people in the world and listening that are plant people, you just have to speak in generalizations. So why are they wrong? Well, let's talk about chlorine first. Chlorine is added to tap water to disinfect it, clean it up, and make it drinkable and get rid of any germs and pathogens, etc., like that. While you can let tap water sit out for 24 hours to let the chlorine gas off, many municipal water systems are now using a different type of chlorine called chloramine that does not gas off. So you can leave your water out for days or weeks and the chloramine does not go away. Also, what does not go away by leaving tap water sitting out for 24 hours are any other contaminants that may be in it. And also minerals that aren't going to go away. So if you hear somebody say don't use tap water on your plants, they might have had a bad situation with it, or they might have just gotten some bad advice. So tap water at most times is usually perfectly okay to use. So again, the chlorine is about the only thing that's going to gas off if you leave your tap water out overnight. Nothing else is. The minerals and anything else that's in there is going to stay there. Now, when it comes to a water softener on your tap water, this is one time when it's definitely a no-no because a lot of water softeners still use basically just salt, sodium chloride, in order to soften the water. That quite often is in quantities enough where it can do damage to plants. And what it does, it just like burns the roots. Actually, it dries them out, kind of like when you see rock salt melting ice. It just absorbs all the moisture there and dries the plant out. Should you boil tap water? You can. It's just a way to get the chlorine to gas off quicker, but then you got to wait several hours for the water to cool down. And boiling tap water, no, it does not remove any other minerals or contaminants that may be in there. So that there as well is a misnomer. So if you have tap water and it's not a municipal system, it's coming out of the ground in your backyard, we always hear the minerals that are in the water. So what are they and what do they do? Well, most of them are micronutrients, which are fertilizers or plant foods or et cetera like that, or chemicals that are needed only in small, minute quantities. And those are the numbers you'll see after the N, P, and K, or those three big numbers on a box of fertilizer. What you can find in tap water coming from the ground is copper, calcium, magnesium, potassium, which is a macronutrient, phosphorus, a macronutrient, iron, selenium, zinc, and chromium. Notice the one micronutrient that's there is magnesium, which is a micronutrient which is beneficial for plant growth, not needed in a lot of quantities. It's in fertilizer, it's in your tap water. So, my question there is, if you have it in your tap water and it's in your fertilizer, why are you still adding Epsom salts to your potted plants? That can do a lot of damage. Now, those nutrients there and those micronutrients, they're good for plants and they're good for us. Now, if you have hard water, we talked about the water softener, and not using the water from the water softener, you have to bypass the water softener so you don't get the salt in it. But hard water does have some damaging characteristics. For instance, that's that unsightly white crust you get on soils and pots. It's very similar to excess fertilizer buildup. Hard water can damage your plants, and it can also help cause a buildup of salt in the soil. It prevents your plants from absorbing moisture properly, and it's also a higher pH, many times because it may contain high amounts of calcium in that water. So there is a way you can use a water softener and be able to use the water that comes from it for plants if you use potassium chloride instead of sodium chloride. Potassium chloride, it's a great ice melter. Works down at a much lower temperature than your basic rock salt. So again, the benefits of tap water: if it's a municipal system and it's chlorinated, it's going to get rid of all the bad stuff that's in it. Very seldom is chlorine in tap water dangerous for your plants or damaging. Perhaps if there was a water line break and they have to rechlorinate the system or supercharge it for whatever reason, that might be the situation there. You can gas off the chlorine by letting it sit out overnight. Chloramine will not gas off, and boiling water or letting it sit out overnight will not get rid of any contaminants or minerals that are already in it. Some other negative parts of hard water: your flower color may be affected by your home's hard water. That's a chemical color change. It can change the color of the leaves and the flowers, similar to aluminum sulfate turning pink hydrangeas blue. Next type of water we're going to talk about to use is water that's run through filters, or primarily reverse osmosis. Reverse osmosis removes minerals and impurities from water, such as chloramine, which letting water sit out will not do. It also removes salts, heavy metals, fertilizers, contaminants, weed killers, insecticides, etc. But because it's removing all that stuff, reverse osmosis water may be missing some of the minerals that plant needs. While it does remove the contaminants, the downside is it will not contain the minerals that we mentioned above: magnesium, potassium, copper, iron, phosphorus, etc., that are good for your plants. Other than that, reverse osmosis water is probably the best water to use next to rainwater if you want to go on a purity of water and the cleanliness of water, or some of the benefits of it. Reverse osmosis water ranks right up there. Distilled water, on the other hand, is totally inert. Everything is removed from it, and distilled water is it's made by boiling water. The steam is captured very similar to making hooch. It's The water condenses on pipes or some surface. It's captured, and what's left is totally inert water that is pretty much has nothing in it except water. Um, some of the downsides, again, will not contain minerals that are good for your plants. And this can result in stunted growth and discolored leaves and flowers because there's no minerals in that water to help substantiate plant growth. Now, with any of the water, reverse osmosis or distilled, which is basically inert, have nothing in it, you can compensate for the lack of minerals by fertilizing. And that type of fertilizer is totally up to you. I do know that there are many growers and gardeners out there who say they don't fertilize their houseplants. Well, maybe you're getting a potting soil that has worm castings or compost in it, but if you're using a basic homemade mix like Pro Mix before they started adding mycorrhiza to it, which is basically 2 parts peat moss or cocoa shells or cocoa coir, 1 part vermiculite, 1 part perlite. There's nothing in there. There's no nutritional value whatsoever to the basic Pro Mix. And if you're not feeding your plants anything at all, and you're using reverse osmosis or distilled water, I really can't see how you're successfully growing plants because every time you water, first of all, there's nothing there to begin with. And the distilled water and reverse osmosis water are nutritionally deficient, and your plants just aren't going to do that well. Now, distilled water can cost anywhere from $1.50 to $3 a gallon, depending on where you're buying it. It doesn't sound like a lot compared to milk, but over the course of time, if you've got 300 plants in your grow room like I do, revert uh, distilled water can get quite expensive. So I really don't see the need for it. And there's some growing concerns about even drinking distilled water because it can be detrimental because it's basically leaching everything out of your system and leaching everything out of the plant system, and it's not replacing anything. Now on to the best water. It's kind of a tie between rainwater and spring water. So we're going to talk mainly about rainwater because spring water, again, is expensive to use unless you have a spring in your backyard that you can get the water from. Now, rainwater, it helps plants grow fine, and it's considered the best source of water because it has nitrate in it, and that is the most bioavailable form of nitrogen. Nitrate is made up of nitrogen and oxygen, and it helps for maximum uptake of macro and micronutrients by plants. It's free of salts, free of minerals, treatment chemicals, and it's slightly acidic. Remember, we talked about hard water being very alkaline, which is not good for plants. It can cause the salt-like buildup on your pots and your soil. Plants prefer slightly acidic soils. Generally speaking, a pH of 5.5 to 6.5, and that's a pretty big range. You can get very specific if you're growing a certain plant that might need 5.2 or another one that might need 5.7, excuse me. But for the most part, for the laid back gardener and the non mad scientist who's got to mix up everything like I do, pH of 5.5 to 6.5 is fine. And rainwater fits that requirement perfectly well. Rainwater unlocks micronutrients that we talked about because it contains the right amount of carbon in it to cause that to happen. And again, these might include zinc, manganese, copper, magnesium, and also rainwater has more oxygen than tap water. So if you're using rainwater, you can put aside the hydrogen peroxide, which has its own negative connotations as well. Rainwater that's stored well can last a long time. The biggest items you're going to have to compete against are algae and mosquito larvae. Mosquito larvae can easily be contained and controlled in rainwater by using the mosquito bits, which contain a bacteria called Bt, which I think is Bacillus thuringiensis, and there's a bunch of varieties, Kerstaki, and a bunch of other ones like that, that attack many insects in their larval form. And so far, it's been proven to be relatively safe and harmless for humans. So there you have it. Tap water, perfectly fine. Not the best, but it does okay in most situations. If your tap water is from a municipal system and it contains chlorine, you can let the chlorine sit out overnight. It will dissipate. However, in just about all cases, the amount of chlorine in water is a negative. There's no negative effect on plants whatsoever. Water softeners. bypass your water softener if you have hard water. The water softener usually contains straight salt, which is no good for plants unless you're using potassium chloride instead of sodium chloride to soften your water. Now, we often soften our water because it's hard, but remember that hard water can cause plants to stunt growth. It can also cause that white buildup of a salt-like material on your pots, on your soil, slows down the plant's ability to absorb nutrients and moisture. And quite often, hard water can be higher pH, which is not good for your plants. pH should be in the 5.5 to 6.5, and alkaline water is anything 7.0 and higher. Now, it may sound like 6.5 to 7 is not a big deal, but it's not just half a point. When you go up 1/10 of a point in the pH scale, it's not just a tenth of a point. It's multiples of more acidity or alkalinity as you go up. It's not, 1/10 of a point and then another one. It's multiples, almost like it's exponential, the difference between the two. And then we have the reverse osmosis water, which is second best to rainwater. But again, reverse osmosis water, you have to buy the system. It can be expensive. It does require some maintenance, etc., like that. It does take out all the bad things from the water, including chemicals, herbicides, uh, bad bacteria, as well as taking out the good stuff. So there's a kind of a toss up there. And finally, rainwater being the best water to use. It's all natural. It's basically free. It is devoid of salts and chlorine and other items. It has nitrate, which is a nitrogen form, which is made of nitrogen and oxygen. It unlocks micronutrients. It has the right amount of carbon in it to unlock those nutrients very easily from the soil. So you can make sure you're getting your zinc, manganese, copper, and magnesium. And what I like is that it also puts oxygen in the soil, eliminating the need many times for hydrogen peroxide. So, but before you do all this and find out, do you need to just do rainwater? Do you need reverse osmosis? Is your municipal water system not up to par, or is your tap water out of the ground bad? Have a water test done to find out what's in it. That's the only way you'll know. First of all, have your water tested is the only way you'll know what's in it, of course. But that's the only way you're going to know if you need to find another way to water your plants. We thank everybody for listening. If you have any questions, you can reach us online at the Indoor Garden, my Facebook page, the Indoor Garden on Instagram, the Indoor Garden on Twitter and TikTok as well. Also, you can reach me on Facebook at Greg's Lawn Service and Garden Care. You can also send a message right here on Anchor. I want to thank everybody for listening. And if you love plants, indoor gardening as much as I do, please stop by my indoor garden shop on Etsy, theindoorgarden.etsy.com. Some great aeroid soils, soil builders, newt roots, which is like a plant supplement that I make, as well as some really good, just top of the line potting mixes. So check us out online for rooted cuttings, soil blends and mixes, nutrients, as well as succulents and foliage plants. This is the Indoor Gardener Podcast. I'm Greg Draiss, your host. Thank you for listening, and good gardening.